Greetings, comrades. I'm Mich Ames. Welcome to another episode of Gigantal Theory. So following on from the success, you could say inspired by the success of my Is Christmas Pagan video, in which we determine Christmas, especially the setting of it, is not pagan. I'll be doing the traditions and stuff for Christmas later on this year. I will now be doing Is Easter Pagan? It's not. And I'll tell you why. And if you people in the comments decide to just put arguments saying, oh, it is pagan holiday, then you've clearly not watched the video, which I'd recommend that you actually watch the video beforehand, before you write anything, in which you actually see all the evidence against your case. And this was very much inspired by Dan Brown. So thank you for inspiring me to correct all the lies you've been telling, because you clearly can't do your own research, or rather you've become so commercialized, then actually put credible things in your own book series. But that's enough bashing anyway. So, this series is meant to be all about how Easter apparently is a celebration of the feast of Ishtar. Easter, Ishtar. I can see the connection between that, yes. But there's no connection. This goes all the way back to Jeremiah 44:15-17, in which Judah, the tribe of Judah, ignored Jeremiah and worshipped this goddess called the Queen of Heaven. This is the most commonly associated with Ishtar. Although, you could say that other various civilizations in the Middle East call it different names in the different worship in different ways, but it is Ishtar, the same way as how the goddess was called Neith in Egypt, Artemis in Greece, and Diana in Rome. In the end, they're all ripping off each other. Now, in the Greek Septuagint, which is the oldest copy of the Bible there is, and it's around 300 BC, we're written around 300 BC, the Queen of Heaven is referred to as Astaroth or Astarte. It means moon, and was worshipped as she was worshipped as a Sidonian goddess by the Phoenicians. It was later adopted by the Assyrians as Astarte, by the Egyptians as Isis, and the Babylonians as Ishtar. And now, because the sun and moon are meant to be seen as the king and queen of the heavens. And so apparently the Greek Astarte became the English Easter. But this is actually wrong. You see, the word Easter actually comes from the Anglo-Saxon pagan goddess called Eoster. But there's still a bit of a confusion around this. So I'm not saying that the holiday Easter is still celebrated because of a pagan goddess. No, you just continue watching, you'll see what I mean. So a long time ago, I'll put the date up now, due to, unfortunately, Saint Bede, the Venerable, who was a monk, was trying to figure out the origins of the English month, coinciding with spring, in which you celebrate Easter, and concluded it was from the month called Eoster Monath. And so he wrote about this Anglo-Saxon deity or goddess called Eoster. Oddly enough, Easter is called Easter in Germany, but throughout the Mediterranean and Western Europe, Easter goes under the name of Paschal, or various different forms of it. Now, this is because it comes from the Greek word Pascha, which comes from the Hebrew word Pesach, which is the word for Passover. Because remember, Jesus, all the events of the crucifixion and all the events of Easter, they happened during Passover, because Jesus is the Passover lamb. In fact, he's referred to as the Paschal lamb, and then in all churches you have also the Paschal candle, which is lit. And then this confusion between the Easter and Paschal all started because in Latin, in albis, which means in white, was what they used to call the Easter week by early Christians. And some people say, okay, well, maybe this was carried into Old High German as Eostarum, which is meant to be the dawn. Or second theory is that it was carried into Old High German as Eoster Monath, which is the month of opening. And it's the same month as April is for Latin, or the Greek Latin-based countries. Now, there's been a lot of confusion, but it's actually very similar here. You see, I know that one's higher up on the planet than the other, but the month of April and the month of Eoster Monath are very, very similar times. And the reason why is because both of them are associated with spring and the opening of the buds, which is the whole point of it. Literally, Eoster Monath, the month of opening. And so basically both these Saxon and Latin months are related to that. They're named after that. So trying to say that it's a pagan holiday because it's named after this pagan month, even though very clearly was celebrated. So even trying to say that Easter is a pagan holiday celebrated in the pagan month, named after a pagan goddess, is very much wrong because the Mediterranean civilization celebrated under a different name, due to a different root word, and it's about as wise as saying that Christmas is based off the feast of Sol Invictus, which I very clearly proved was wrong and clearly outdated that pagan holiday. I mean, there are pagan holidays everywhere, just keep that in mind. And I'm not focusing on that, just the Romans here, but Germans too. As you all know, Britain faced a lot of beatings from surrounding nations. First the Celts, there were the Celts there, and then they were invaded by the Romans, and then the Anglo-Saxons, and the Normans, and everything, and the Vikings, then the Normans. But the point was that when the Anglo-Saxons went into Britain, and just so you know, the Anglo-Saxon area of Germany is a little bit underneath Denmark, okay? And so all these German words got transferred directly to the English language, which is why the English language is such a horrible language to learn, because it's literally a Frankenstein's monster of different languages put together. It's not as pure as the Latin is. And so there's a lot of confusion. So if people talk about the problems of saying, oh, well, you shouldn't celebrate Easter, it's a pagan holiday, just saying, okay, I'll call it Paschal. Go, put up an argument now while I celebrate Paschal, which clearly has no pagan roots whatsoever. But so feel free to call it Easter or Paschal, whatever. But just know that the actual holiday itself predates all this confusion and was known as Paschal by the early Christians, and was only related in England and Germany, the only two countries to actually call it Easter, was called Easter because of various invasions coming along and then trying to associate, okay, well, let's call it this so that they understand what we're talking about. Because that's what a lot of the countries end up doing. That's what the Jews did when they were in Babylonian exile. They named 4 of their months after pagan Babylonian gods. No problem with that. It was just one way of trying to get to make sense of both the Babylonian and the Jewish calendars, so that people could actually understand what they're talking about. They say, oh yeah, it's this day of this month. I'm sorry, what month? Yeah. Oh, the third month after this month. Ah, okay, I get that now. As you can see here, it's all about trying to cross the language barrier here. Second thing I want to talk about for Easter is the concept of the Easter Bunny. People believe this is a connection to Ishtar, based on the Astarte business, but it's not. You see, Ishtar was the Mesopotamian fertility goddess, right, or Babylonian, whatever. And her symbols, some of the symbols are like lions and stars and all that. The rabbit was not one of them. All we know of Jostar, that German pagan goddess, is from what Saint Bede, I believe that's the prince's name, Saint Bede the Venerable wrote. And he did not mention any bunnies whatsoever. Bunnies, you need to remember, I should just call them rabbits, bunnies, I'm going to call them bunnies. Bunnies appear in spring, okay? It's part of that season. Like, you see bunnies and you know spring is coming. And so adopting that, saying, oh look, let's put this bunny here as a symbol that, Easter, that bunny is a symbol that spring is coming. Well, I'm going to get this card with a bunny on it to show that Easter's coming. That's because it's spring. Easter is in spring. Spring is when rabbits come out. It's not hard to understand that. I mean, remember, God created everything. He created all the days. He created all the different the stars and objects in the sky. He created all the animals before us. He created eggs and stuff. If people in their pride want to make their own gods and say, okay, well, this the sun is a symbol of our God, and so's that animal there, and I'm going to celebrate it on this day. You don't trademark any of those items. God can very clearly say, well, since I created this, I can do with my infinite authority to take everything of that, every piece of symbolism associated with that, and remove all your pagan filth from it, and use it in its pure form, as such when I created it, to celebrate something of mine.
For those of you who think the Feast of Ishtar had some sort of influence over when the Passover feast was established, seriously, if you actually look at the timing of this, you'll see that when the timing of Bigger's Exodus occurred around 1450 BC, the Hebrews were still in Egypt during the 10th plague. I mean, you can actually see where this was all established. So in this particular biblical quote here, this reading, you'll see that the Feast of Passover had already been established when it was still in Egypt. And keep in mind that at this point in time, Mesopotamia was in the Kassite dynasty, which meant that it was no further than Iraq. It was even further away from the Egyptian influence over the Middle East. There would not have been any sort of influence from Mesopotamia, and their gods and feasts and all that over the setting of the Passover. Keep in mind that Christianity based the date of Easter around Passover, because that was when it actually occurred. There couldn't have been any pagan influence over when Passover was established, let alone Easter or Paschal.
If God doesn't have a problem with people celebrating his holidays with various animals as symbols of it, or whatever, or any object or whatever of it, then there's nothing wrong with that. Because they're keeping in mind that it's meant to be about him, not about the animals and stuff they use. I mean, besides, we didn't make the Easter Bunny anyway. I mean, that's probably what the Lutherans and Protestants did during the Reformation. I mean, it's not the first time they've done this. I mean, they first took St. Nicholas, Bishop of Myra, and turned him into a fat old man with a big beard, fat stomach, wearing red or green. Every Christmas Eve, went around to deliver presents. Yes, I'm talking about Santa Claus here. They invented the modern interpretation of Santa Claus. That's for another video. And similar to this, they probably also invented the Easter hare, which is very similar to Santa, and he was meant to judge the children and everything. Although it was probably, in their defense, probably wasn't their intention to teach their children about paganism or fertility through the Easter hare. It was probably just started as a way of controlling their children. You know, oh, behave, or you won't get presents this year, or behave, you won't get eggs this year, right? Santa. And just because that the modern secular world has secularized and commercialized such symbols, you know, secularizing the holidays in the first place, and then the symbols associated with them, does not mean that the original meaning is lost. They're still there. People just celebrate it differently because they clearly don't look in history. I mean, again, you can celebrate Easter however you want. You can celebrate it with rabbits. You can celebrate it with flowers. You can celebrate it with whatever you want. But as long as you remember the point of Easter, which was Jesus being crucified for our sins, so that we might be saved through his sacrifice, there's nothing wrong with it. If I want to celebrate it with knowing that there's a giant bunny delivering stuff, which I clearly know there isn't, but if I want to celebrate it like that, then I can, as long as I remember that Jesus did this for me. Because in the end, Easter is not about the Easter bunny. If I want to celebrate it by putting cards with a giant rabbit holding a basket full of Easter eggs, I can. But as long as I remember the fact that Jesus died on that day for me and remind others of it, there's nothing wrong with celebrating it. As long as you remember what the point of that holiday is and don't get too caught up in how you celebrate it, there is nothing wrong with celebrating it that way. And this relates very nicely into the next point, which is Easter eggs. Now, the first recorded use of Easter eggs were through the early Mesopotamian Christians, who painted eggs with red to symbolize Jesus' blood, although there were reports of apparently some eggs being painted green or yellow. And this was meant to symbolize, again, Jesus' blood. And when they were cracked open on Sunday, they were meant to symbolize the empty tomb of Jesus after he had been born, after he was resurrected from it. When people are celebrating with Easter eggs, they clearly aren't celebrating some weird pagan symbol, whatever. No, they're celebrating the modern version of it. Remember, regardless of how commercialized or secularized all these holidays and symbols and stuff have been, they've usually got their roots traced back to Christianity. And then you'll notice a period of time which there's nothing, and then maybe the pagans celebrated it. And any pagan association with those events or objects with Easter has been completely lost and died in history. No gods or goddesses can stand up against God, and so their ideology behind and symbolism behind them dies. And modern egg hunting, which started at this date, occurred many centuries after it was apparently used as a pagan fertility symbol. When they were celebrating Easter this way, they did not have a pagan image in their head of eggs or Ishtar or whatever people think it was connected to. They simply had it as a way of celebrating Easter. It was in the several hundred years between the death of Ishtar as an ideology and Easter egg hunting. Plenty of time to forget about that. Plenty of time for it to be associated with something else. You're probably wondering why it would be eggs of all things, right? Well, the reason why is because and this is especially common in Eastern Europe, in Eastern Christianity, eggs were abstained as well as dairy and meat during Lent, right? Which is why Pancake Day is important, Shrove Tuesday. You get rid of all the dairy and eggs and everything. And so, almost as a treat during Easter, eggs were meant to be eaten, and it was eventually passed into Western Europe. And then because people in Western Europe, because they didn't abstain from dairy or meat or eggs or whatever, they later would abstain from stuff like chocolates and sweets and sugars and everything, right? And So you basically had this huge. He didn't eat all this stuff for Lent, and also as a way to celebrate the end of Lent. For Easter, they would make chocolate eggs and eat that because it symbolized both the end of that abstaining from chocolates and sweets, and it also symbolized the egg, which had its roots in Mesopotamian Christianity, in which it was meant to show the empty tomb of Jesus, which is why no matter how hard I try, I can never find solid chocolate Easter eggs. Although I'd love to know on that, I'm gonna need to remember that it's empty because that's the point of it. I mean, obviously they're trying to save chocolate, but it's also got another meaning, the fact that that's the empty tomb of Jesus. And then obviously there's a bit of a difference though between normal egg and eggshell, like chicken egg, and then Easter eggs, and that's because the eggs used to be First, it started with dyeing them different colors. Then they started with painting them, and they became more and more elaborately decorated and everything. And seriously, you get some beautiful Easter eggs, you really can. Unfortunately, Easter eggs are being somewhat commercialized nowadays. However, as long as you remember the original meaning of the egg, which is that it symbolizes the empty tomb of Jesus, you can celebrate with as many chocolate eggs as you want. Just as long as you don't get cavities and you actually remember the point of those eggs, it's fine. Now, the date of Easter has been somewhat controversial because, as you know, it changes every year, and the reason why is because it's not set on our solar calendar. It follows a lunar calendar instead, and the reason why is because the Judaism uses a lunar calendar, and the laws of Moses states that Passover needs to be celebrated on the 14th of the month of Nisan. No, I'm not talking about the car company, and this is in Leviticus 23:5. And so basically it's meant to be celebrated on the spring month that has the equinox, okay, when the day and night are equal lengths, and it's the full moon after the equinox. And because the Jewish month starts on the new moon, the 14th fell on a full moon. So as such, Passover is celebrated as the same time as Easter. So when Easter was celebrated as the same time as Passover, they used to use the Jewish calendar. But the problem was the early Christians relied too much on the Jews for their date of Passover, so the Jews would lie to them about it, so they would celebrate Easter all over the place. And eventually the Christians had to create their own calendar for this, which was very important. And a lot of claims is that Easter is meant to be a symbolic holiday, right? It's meant to be symbolic and not actually happen or anything. But that's actually a lot of rubbish, we know that. I mean, although yes, the Bible has 4 ways of interpreting it. There's the literal meaning, the allegorical meaning, the moral meaning, and the anagogical meaning. I really hate that word. I hate that word absolutely because I struggle to pronounce it. But you need to keep in mind the literature and the time period of when all this stuff was written. For instance, the Hebrew historical narrative and the Hebrew literal narratives are very different, right? Like if you compare the first 5 books of the Bible, like Exodus, compared to which is historical narrative, to the Psalms, which is literal narrative. The details of the resurrection are very, very precise and very clear, almost as if they're too clear to be faked, which you can see evidence of in 1 Corinthians 15, 1-20. The resurrection was written after interviews from people who had eyewitness accounts, which is seen in Luke 1-2 and John 21-24. It's almost like it was written in such a way to specify that it wasn't faked. Like seriously, it was focusing. It's the details of the resurrection. Yeah, okay, you may need to do some research on them to put them together because the 4 Gospels don't seem to work in unison with one another. You need to actually put research to find out how they all fit together. But it's almost like they're too specified to be faked. And yeah, just a quick thing. It wasn't in the original script, but I'm going to add this anyway. One time when I was arguing with an agnostic, he said that Jesus lied about coming back being dead for 3 days. And so I was confused, like, what do you mean? And he said, well, he died on Friday and came back on Sunday. So the reason why is you need to take into account the Hebrew language and Hebrew grammar. The Hebrew word yom means day, but it could also mean an unspecified period of time. So although it technically means a day, and you could refer to anything like a day, like I did that 3 yamin ago, 3 days ago. It could mean because yamin is a plural of yom. It could mean a whole number of things. It could mean that you did it 3 times 24 hours ago, or it could just mean what you mean it to be. You need to define what day is, right? Well, yes, technically Jesus, he wasn't dead for 3 periods of 24 hours, right? He died on Friday evening, he was dead throughout Saturday, and he came back on Sunday morning. So he was dead for less than 24 hours, which is incredible. I've known people who've been dead for far longer, but he came back very quickly. So in order to prevent the confusion about this, Jesus did come back on 3 days. The Bible said that on the third day he would come back. Remember? On the part of the Nicene Creed, on the third day he rose again in accordance with the scriptures. And people go, really? But how can you come back from after he's been dead? He was only dead for not even 2 days. Simple. With the Hebrew word yom, it's very vague. It means day, but it means very vague about how long it runs for. So how do you figure out how long the word is? Well, you need to look at it in context. If someone specifies something like, I did this, evening came, the morning came again, and it's simply saying, okay, I did this one day, and then the next day I did that. But they're basically saying there was a night between them. So he did it for 2 days, even if it wasn't 2 24-hour periods. So let's look at the account of resurrection again. He died on Friday, day 1. He was dead on Saturday, day 2. And he rose again on Sunday, day 3. He was dead for 3 days of the week. Not 3 times 24-hour periods, but 3 days of the week. That's the thing about Yom. You need to look at it in context, because the Hebrew grammar requires that you need to specify how long that period is. You can't just use Yom as, okay, well that's a day. No, you need to specify how long that period of time is using grammar, so other passing of time words. So by saying that he was dead on one day, he remained dead for the next day, and then he came back the day after that, you're basically saying he was dead for 3 days, 3 yamin, even if it wasn't 3 24-hour periods, and that's also I'm going to emphasize that. So he was dead for 3 days. You just need to look at it in context and Hebrew grammar to understand it. But the point of this video is to basically say that Easter definitely does not have pagan roots. It is the most important holiday of the Christian year, even more so than Christmas. I mean, you may not celebrate Christmas, that's fine, but you need to celebrate Easter because the whole of Christianity relies on Easter. Remember, it's meant to be about Jesus coming back from the dead. That is one of the greatest things that happened in the Bible, coming back from the dead. Okay, that sacrifice he did for us saved us from sin, or from the consequences of sin. But you need to accept it all and everything, to follow a bunch of rules. But the point is, it saved us. That is the most important holiday in the Christian year. To neglect that is to basically neglect the entire faith. Some people, for some reason, think that Jesus didn't actually die, which is a load of rubbish. Yep, there's the rubbish bin again. But I'll do that in another video, okay, guys? Just point about that. I mean, again, if you want to argue about the way certain nations or cultures celebrate Easter, you're going to have to take it up with them, not with the church. I mean, for instance, a friend of mine who's from Slovakia, she says that before midday in Slovakia, what they would do on Easter, Easter Monday, I believe it was, they would spank women with something called an Easter whip. And after after midday, they would soak them instead with cold water or spray them with perfume. No, sorry, this is on Easter Monday. But the day after, on Easter Tuesday, all the women would do that to the men. Although the practice of ambushing women, yes, they would do that apparently, is now illegal because they've seen it as a form of bullying. And apparently people were meant to sing a song of fertility or something beforehand. And although it sounds weird, this is going to sound weird, but it's not meant to be painful. It's meant to be painful, but it's not meant to cause suffering, like you're trying to whip the backside off. But clearly, this may not be a church-approved way of celebrating Easter, but it's not like the church probably hasn't said. I'm sure the church probably said, you really shouldn't celebrate it like that. But in the end, it's free will here. That's what the culture celebrates. They're very welcome to stop. And again, this may have, the way they may celebrate it may have some pagan roots, but that's not the church's fault. That's that nation's fault. That's that culture's fault. But remember, as long as they're celebrating the whole point of Easter, which is the resurrection of Jesus, and as long as there is no pagan association with like singing that song about eggs and fertility and everything, doesn't matter where you got it from. I mean, some of the psalms apparently are pagan, but they clearly have no pagan meaning to them anymore. As long as that pagan meaning is stripped off, I guess you could say that the way of celebrating it is almost in a sense pure from pagan influence. I mean, it's not like they're shouting the names of their pagan gods and everything during this process. But as long as it's not associated with paganism or they've abandoned pagan roots, a weird way of celebrating Easter through culture. But again, if you have problems with that, you need to take up with the culture, not with the church. So again, take it up with the culture if you've got a problem with that, not with the church. So I just want to wish everyone who does have to live through that, all you Eastern Europeans, good luck for Easter. You may want to spend a lot of time running away from various people on Easter Monday and Tuesday. Oh, but that's the end of this video. So as you can see here, clearly Easter is not pagan related, nor any of its customs. I mean, if a nation seems to have a weird pagan custom for celebrating Easter, then that's that nation's fault, not the actual church's fault. I mean, you have to literally look at that nation's culture and history to understand it, and you will find that there is no church origin for that. It was either just it being rebranded by those nations when they left paganism, and not actually the church starting there in the first place. Again, I can't emphasize enough. A lot of these traditions, the church did not start. It was the nations themselves. If you have a problem with that, you take it up with those nations, not with the church. But that's all for this video. So if you like this video, please give a like, please share my videos, please comment what you think of them, any other videos you want me to do. Please subscribe to my channel so you can see more content, and please ring the bell to keep updated with my video releases. Next episode, I'll probably find some other I'll probably find some other holiday to debunk as a pagan origin for you. Maybe it'll be All Hallows Eve next time, I'm not too sure. Point is, Easter is not a pagan holiday unless you try to make it, in which then you are the one making it a pagan holiday. Anyway, so that's all for this video. So see you next video, comrades. Until then.